Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. We'll begin with our prayers. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuro Nilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutam Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam साद्वैतं सावधूतं सहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्त काञ्चना गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि प्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion from Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 4. Last time we completed chapter 28. In this chapter, we heard how Puranjan, he becomes a woman in the next life because he was overly attached to his wife. And because he had some pious credits, he must have served some devotees. So he got a chance to associate with a great devotee as her wife, Vaibhav. And Vaibhav, she became the wife of she became the wife of Malaya Dhwaja, who was a great devotee. And ultimately, Malaya Dhwaja, he retired and she begot many children, sons and daughters, then the granddaughters, grandsons. Spiritually, it represents a living entity somehow coming in touch with the spiritual master, and he develops a desire, he develops a taste for loving Krishna. And because of that taste for loving Krishna, appears so many different ways of means in which a devotee likes to serve the Lord. The daughters are Shravanam, the sons are nine ways of devotional service, and the daughter is the taste for loving Krishna. And then ultimately, Malaya Dhwaja, at a proper time, he renounces the kingdom, goes to the forest, Vaibhav follows him. Malaya Dhwaja, he is doing intense tapasya there and ultimately achieves perfection, leaves his body. Vaibhav, she realized that her husband is gone. She is lamenting and she is also thinking of entering the funeral pyre. As she is contemplating, an old friend, unknown friend comes there in the form of Brahmana, that is Avigyata, that is Paramatma in the heart of a living entity. And then the wonderful conversation started between Brahmana and this Vaidarbhi. And ultimately, this Avigyata described how you and me, we are staying in one kingdom. You forgot me, that is a Lord, and the living entity staying in the spiritual world. Living entity forgets the Lord, comes here in this material world, tries to enjoy and suffers. So all these things are described. And ultimately, Narad Muni describes that this is the story I have told so that you can be detached from this material world and futile activities. So that is what we have discussed so far. We'll continue with 29th chapter. The talks between Narad and King Prachina Varhi. So now in this chapter, Prachina Varhi, he very frankly asks, आपने इतना बड़ा स्टोरी सुनाया मुझे कुछ नहीं समझा. Can you please tell me what it means? So then Narad Muni explains the allegory himself in this chapter. Okay. Prachina Barihiruvacha Bhagavan Stevacho Asmavi Na Samyaka Bhagamyate Kavayastad Vichakti Na Vayam Karma Mohita.
Navayam karma vahita. King Prachin Prahi replied, My dear Lord, we could not appreciate completely the purport of your allegorical story of King Puranjana. Actually, those who are perfect in spiritual knowledge can understand, but for us who are overly attached to fruitive activities, to realize the purpose of your story is very difficult.
So he is very frankly saying, ये आपने बहुत बड़े लोगों की बात बता दी है, मुझे कुछ नहीं समझ रहा है. I'm not able to understand. भगवान वत्ते वचो अस्माभि, we could not appreciate completely. सम्यक अवगम्य, मतलब थोड़ा समझा, I understood little bit, but I can't understand completely what you are saying. Your allegorical story is difficult to understand. And he says, Kavayastad vijananti. So the great learned scholars can understand this, but we are absorbed in karmic activities, karma mohita. So it is very difficult for us to understand. Prabhupada writes, Krishna says, Tribhir gunamair bhavai bhi sarvamidam jagat mohitam na vijanati mamebhya paramapyayam. The bewildered people, they can't understand the Supreme Lord because they are under the control of the modes. And under the control of the modes, people, they perform various sinful activities. And Narad Muni explained this allegorical story to Prachina Barhi so that he can ultimately give up his material activities and engage in devotional service of the Lord. Prabhupada writes, the entire story is easily understood by a person in devotional service, but those who are engaged not in devotional service, but in sense gratification, cannot perfectly understand it. So the spiritual principles for us, we may be thinking it is so very easy to understand these principles. But for materialistic people, it is very difficult to even grasp and accept these principles because their intelligence is completely bewildered by sense gratification. भोग ऐश्वर्य प्रसक्तानां तया परित चेतसां व्यवसायात्मिका बुद्धि समाधौ न विधीयते. The resolute determination for practicing bhakti does not arise in the heart of a person who is absorbed in sense gratification. So materialists, they can't understand the subject matters which we can understand so very easily. Prabhupada writes, this 29th chapter describes that by too much attachment for women, one becomes a woman. A person who associates with the Lord becomes free from all material attachments. As Devahuti told in third canto, Prasangam majaram pasham atmanam kavayo vidu saeva sadhu shukrito mokshadwaram apavritam. When somebody starts associating with the sadhu, saeva, the knots of attachment, the same attachment if somebody has for the things and people of the world, if that attachment is dovetailed to be attached to devotees, Saiva sadhu shukrito, that will become his way, door of liberation. So that is very important. Okay, now Narad Muni, he starts explaining his whole allegory. I'll recite this. Narada uvacha purusham puranjanam vidyad yad vyanakyatmanah param eka dvi tri chatushpadam bahupadam apadakam. Translation.
The great sage Narad Muni continued, you must understand that Puranjana, the living entity, transmigrates according to his own work into different types of bodies, which may be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, four-legged, many-legged, or simply legless. Transmigrating into these various types of bodies, the living entity, the so-called enjoyer, is known as Puranjana.
Okay. Yes, Mataji, you have a question?
Yes, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, same similar allegorical story is explained to Daksas and Haryasvarshas.
Yeah.
So they could understand why Prachina Parikshit could not understand this allegorical story.
He was not so intelligent. The sons of Prachina, Barhi, Daksha, they were not engaged in sense gratification yet. They were pure. They were untouched. They had just gone to do tapasya. They had not experienced the enjoyment of this world. So their intelligence was more refined. That is what is described. When somebody engages in sense gratification, they become dull to the spiritual realities. And this is the very graphic example. He is himself saying, I did not understand. And Shaulashwas, it was very easy for them. Shaulashwas, to matlab, your brothers are doing, you also do. And they said, okay. So that is how easy it is easy for a pure person to start taking to Krishna consciousness. But a person who has tasted the mundane pleasure of this world, it becomes very difficult. So that's the reason.
Thank you, teacher.
So, Narad Muni now starts explaining. He says that Puranjan, I have described this story of Puranjan. Who is this Puranjan? That is a living entity, the Atma. Atma can go to various species of life. He again starts the allegory. The first chapter. First chapter means I think 25th chapter he started this.
Yes,
Yeah, 25th chapter. He described how this Puranjan is searching for the kingdom. He goes to various kingdoms. Nobody satisfies. Nothing is satisfying to Puranjan. So what is this various kingdom? That is a different body. So he's saying one-legged, two-legged, three, four, many, legless. Prabhupada writes. Legless, ek pad means ghosts. The ghosts walk on one leg. दिखेगा तो बताइएगा ऐसा दिखता है. द्विपाद means human beings. त्रिपाद means त्रिपाद क्या होता है? तो एक स्टिक ले लिया तो त्रिपाद हो जाता है. चतुष्पाद animals. बहुपाद insects, centipede. अपाद यो अविज्ञातारित तस्य पुरुषस्य सकेश्वरः यं न विज्ञायते पुंभी नामभिर्वा क्रियागुणैः.
The person I have described as unknown is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master and eternal friend of the living entity. Since the living entities cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains everlastingly unknown to the conditioned soul.
Okay, so now says, I told about this Avigyata friend. Who is this Avigyata? Paramatma. His activities are unknown. How Lord is working in the life of every living entity is not possible to be understood. Nahiyasya karhijit rajan puman ved viditstam yad vijigyasaya yukta muhyanti kavayopihi. Even the great learned people are bewildered. They can't understand how the Lord is working in our life. Prabhupada writes, Lord is known by different names, Nirakar, Avigyat, Avang Manas Gocharaha. Prabhupada would use a verse many times which describes Lord cannot be perceived by our senses. मुझे भी याद नहीं आ रहा क्या है वो? Anyone remembers? Lord cannot be perceived by the senses. Adhokshaja. Anyways, so ठीक है, याद आएगा तो बताइएगा. Very common verse ना, बहुत common है. प्रभुपाद बहुत बार बोलते हैं. It's not getting okay. So Prabhupada writes, actually it is a fact that Lord cannot be perceived by material senses. However, when one is spiritually advanced, they can easily perceive it. Bhaktya mam abhijanati. Lord reveals, नीचे प्रभुपाद खुद ही लिख रहे हैं. नहीं. वही प्रभुपाद अतः श्री कृष्ण नाम आदि न भवेत् ग्राह्यम इंद्रिय सेवोन्मुखी शिवाद. Prabhupada is quoting that in the purport. So Krishna cannot be perceived by Krishna's name, form, pastimes. Na bhavet grahyam indriyai. He is adhokshaja, beyond the perception of senses. Prabhupada writes about adhokshaja also. Yeah, beyond sense perception. In other words, in this verse, the words pumbhir, namabhir, va kriya gunai, they are significant. Lord has so many names, activities, pastimes, qualities, none of them are material. Okay. So Lord is not perceivable. Recording is already going on. Yeah, it is going on.
Once it got disconnected.
Okay, so we'll continue from which verse? We are on third verse.
Third.
Okay, so now Prabhupada is writing how the Krishna's name, form, pastimes cannot be perceivable by the senses. So as Narad Muni describes, Paramatma, his activities are unknown. Nobody can understand. He is among manasa gocharaha. Namabhirva kriya gunai. He has so many pastimes, so many qualities, so many names, but they are all spiritual. Nobody can tell that nobody should say that Lord has material qualities. And although the Lord is working in this material world, doing creation, maintenance, destruction, but he is unaffected by all the activities. Next verse. Yada jighrikshan purushah tarsnena prakritir gunai navadvaram dvihastangri tara manuta sadviti tatra manuta sadviti. Translation.
When the living entity wants to enjoy
Hare
the
Krishna.
material nature in their totality, he prefers out of many bodily forms to accept that body which has 9 gates, 2 hands and 2 legs. Thus, he prefers to become a human being or a demigod.
Okay, so now he starts describing the city of 9 gates. So, as we heard in the 25th chapter, Puranjan, moving around the world trying to find a good place to enjoy and rule, he ultimately finds a nice city on the southern side of Himalayas. That is the human body. So, this human body is now being described. Either a human body or a body of a Devata. They are both very suitable to enjoy in this material world. Prabhupada writes. This is a very nice explanation of how a spiritual being accepts body by virtue of his own desires. So everything is happening in this world because of the desire of the living entity. That is the cause of this creation. That is the cause of the maintenance of this creation. Because living entity desires, the Lord maintains this material world. He provides everything.
Would the desire also come through the mercy of the Lord, or maybe is an interference from the Lord? Na? It's a free
Desire is coming from the soul. Desire, because every
It's a
living
previous,
entity
it's a previous impressions, material impressions causing that desire project.
yes, but if we talk about the beginning of the material existence, which is of course difficult to understand, nobody can say, nobody will understand how we fell. The same question, why Jiva fell down, when we fell, why
Correct.
we fell. So all these things are difficult to understand. But as scriptures, Chaitanya Charitamrita says that Krishna bhuliya jiva bhogavancha kare nikatastha maya tare jhapatiya kare. Krishna bhuliya means we were remembering him at one time, then we forgot. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says actually these things are difficult to understand when it is described that we forgot. Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in Jaiva Dharma that living entities are created by Mahavishnu. So if they are created by Mahavishnu, then they were not there in the spiritual world. That means they were not there in Vaikuntha or Goloka. So then there it is described that the perception of realities by our conditioned soul, it is very, very difficult for a conditioned soul to understand how the reality and the time in the spiritual world works. So therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur tells there through that story of this seeker, he says, don't try to understand because you will never understand. Just try to practice devotional service, perfect your life, and then you will automatically understand in due course. So what was the original cause? What was the original desire? That is very difficult to understand. But the fact is, we have the potential to achieve the highest standards of existence. We can become the associate of the Lord. So that is That is very, very clear. So that is no doubt. So the desire is the cause of material existence. And in second canto, we heard, I think in third canto, in the process of creation, one of the five, there are five times creation is described in second and third canto total. One of the cause of description of Virata Rupa was the desire of the living entity creates this entire universe. We have heard in the Virat Rupa desired to smell and the nose was created. Virat Rupa desired to see and eyes were created. That means Virat Rupa desired means living entity is desired. And when we desire, Lord facilitates to fulfill our desires. So this human form, it is perfect for enjoyment and it is perfect for liberation also. Ichha dvesha samuttena dandmohena bharata sarvam bhutani sammoham sarge yanti param. All the living entities are born in delusion, Ichha dvesha, and they have their desire and they have hatred for some things. Then Prabhupada writes, ordinarily, the living entity is a spiritual being. When he desires to enjoy this world, he comes down. Srila Prabhupada, he always in his purports, he never goes into the technical details of why Jiva fell, because we can never understand. So he always goes with the same theme that we fell down. That's what Chaitanya Charitamrita says. कृष्ण भूलिया जी भूल गए मतलब कभी तो याद थे ना तभी तो भूले. So Prabhupada takes that theme because it is very difficult for a conditioned soul to understand भूल गए कैसे भूल गए, but हम तो महाविष्णु से आ गए हैं तो भूल कैसे गए, we were never there or we were there. So all these things are very difficult to understand. So don't discuss all this because it is beyond our scope of understanding. Just try to become a liberated being. बस liberated being बनना है बस और कुछ. It is not so easy, but that is the only way. So Prabhupada writes, by the gradual process of evolution, the living entity attains the human body and is given a chance to get out of this transmigration. And then the next paragraph, Prabhupada writes, the desire of the living entity to come in this material world is not very difficult to understand. The desires are always there. We have different desires, but it depends on the quality of desire a living entity has. According to that, we will get a body in the next life. Urdhvam gacchanti sattvastha madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya gunavrittistha adho gacchanti tamasa. Whatever our desires are, we will get a body accordingly. And people, a living entity thinks, I am the maintainer, I am the creator, I am the doer, kartahamiti manyate. That is a false understanding. Okay, he continues. Buddhim tu pramadam vidyam amaham iti yat kritam yam adhisthaya dehesmin puman bhumte akshabhir gunan.
The great sage Narada continued. The word pramada mentioned in this regard refers to material intelligence or ignorance. It is to be understood as such. When one takes shelter of this kind of intelligence, he identifies himself with the material body. Influenced by the material consciousness of I and mine, he begins to enjoy and suffer through his senses. Thus, the living entity is entrapped.
Okay, so this Pramada, the wife, the beautiful lady which this Puranjan he sees in the city of nine gates. Who is this? That is materially contaminated dharmic intelligence. He is a pious man. Prachin Bari is a pious person. He is a great pious king. So he is making the same allegory where he is saying he is having a materially contaminated pious intelligence, dharmic intelligence. And that is what is the lady. And when he says, when one takes shelter of such kind of intelligence, he thinks, I am this body. Puman bhunkte akshabhir gunan. And he tries to enjoy bhunkte. As Bhagavad Gita also says, Purusha prakriti sthohi bhunkte prakriti jan gunan. 13th chapter, 21st verse. Purusha prakriti sthohi bhunkte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sango asya sad asad yoni janmasu. Why a living entity takes birth in the Sat and Asat species? Bhunkte, the desire to enjoy. So because of this contaminated intelligence, the living entity desires to enjoy. And he suffers. Sometimes he enjoys, sometimes he suffers. Prabhupada says,
Prabhuji, initially,
yeah. Haribol?
sorry, Prabhuji, initially he connect with the materialistic material intelligence, which is actually uh, initial he connection with the materialistic mind, materialistic intelligence, which is corrupted, and then later on the dharmic intelligence, and the last time he gives up that intelligence, dharmic intelligence also, and he is like spiritual master Maladhwaja, and finally connect with the super soul. So here it is in the first explanation, he is saying this intelligence is materialistic intelligence, na Prabhuji?
Yes. So this Puranjan, he has a materially contaminated dharmic intelligence. So this lady which he found in the city of Nine Gates, she is a pious lady. Why he is telling this story? Because Prachina Bari is a pious dharmic king, so that he can relate to this allegory. See, I am also pious dharmic, and he is also getting a pious dharmic intelligence. So this intelligence is dharmic intelligence rooted in dharma, piety, but material contaminated, because that is not pure devotional intelligence. That is the intelligence to enjoy. I will do pious activities, but the purpose is to enjoy. So that is what is described here as this lady.
Okay.
So then Prabhupada writes, when this intelligence is cleared up, then it is called as Buddhi Yoga. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami Buddhi Yoga. And that is real intelligence. That is linking with the Supreme, Prabhupada writes. And by that intelligence only, one can return back home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada writes, intelligence is described as pramada, because in the material existence, the living entity falsely claims things to be his. Pramada, it is madness. You are claiming things as your own. It is as if Prabhupada would say, if somebody says, this person has renounced the world, what do you have to renounce? If somebody is walking by SBI bank and says, I renounce this bank, आपका था क्या? आपका था ही नहीं, तो what is the question of renouncing? So nothing in this world belongs to us, but ahankar vimudhatma karta miti manyate, thinks that I am renouncing, or I have this, I am the controller. So that is a problem. Prabhupada writes, nothing belongs to him. The body and the senses do not belong to him. They are property of the Lord. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate. Everything is given by him. So why you are telling that this is mine? It is all illusion. The process of Krishna consciousness actually purifies the mind, purifies the intelligence. That is the spiritual intelligence. That is the third chapter Bhagavad Gita, last verse. Evam buddhe param buddhva samshtapayatmanam atmana jai shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Krishna says, cultivate the spiritual intelligence. Evam buddhe param buddhva. Use your spiritual intelligence and give up this enemy called as lust. So that selfish desire, which has occupied not just our mind, it has occupied our intelligence also. So Krishna is saying, give up this intelligence, give up this material intelligence and acquire spiritual intelligence. That is the antivirus we have to put. Now our software is corrupted. Intelligence is also corrupted. Intelligence is on the side of the mind only. Mind says, I like this. And intelligence says, अच्छा कैसे plan करें? क्या plan करेंगे इसको लेने के लिए? He is not saying it. He will not say it is wrong. So corrupted intelligence, it will plan, it will rationalize, but to get the things of this world, to enjoy. And spiritual intelligence means to see things as it is. And this is the intelligence which is given by scriptures. That's why regular reading of scriptures is must. Marga babhuva sandigdha trinai channahya samskrita na abhyasyamana shutayo dujai kalena chahata. आप लोग पगडंडी पे चलेंगे खेत के बीच में जो एक जैसी छोटी सी रहती है गांव में चलते चलते वहां पे पगडंडी बनती है ना nobody makes that. People are walking, it is made. But in the rainy season, what happens? Nobody walks. So it gets covered by the weeds. Similarly, Shukdev Goswami says in the 10th canto, when we keep on studying, the weeds of doubt will not grow in our mind, in our intelligence. Marga babhuva sandigdha. मार्ग संदिग्ध हो जाते हैं तृणाच्छे से because nobody is walking. Similarly, abhyasyamana shutayo, अभ्यास नहीं किया तो our mind will be full of doubts. Vijay kalena chahata. This is 10th canto. In that word description of the rainy season and autumn season, उसमें आता है मार्गाह बभूव संदिग्ध, मार्ग संदिग्ध हो जाते हैं. Doubts about the principles of bhakti, principles of spiritual life. If you are not very clear in our understanding, if you are not reading regularly, then somebody will say something and we'll start thinking, बराबर बोल रहा है ये. Then agyascha ashraddhadanasya samshayatma vinashyati. Then we'll fall down. So that regular study is must. Prabhupada writes. People start claiming this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. Janasya mohoyam aham mameti. This is called illusion. Nothing belongs to the living entity, but he claims that everything belongs to him. When the mirror of intelligence is polished, Chetu Darpa Marjanam, the real activities begin. Okay, next verse. Sakhaya Indriya Gana Jnanam Karma cha Yatritam Sakyastad Vrittaya Prana Pancha Vrittir Yathoragaha.
The five working senses and the five senses that acquire knowledge are all male friends of Puranjani. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activity. The engagement of the senses are known as girlfriends, and the serpent, which was described as having 5 heads, in the life air acting within the 5 circulatory processes.
Okay, so we have discussed this all previously also. Prabhupada writes, Krishna bhuliya, Krishna bahirmukh hoiya, bhogavancha kare, nikatastha maya tare chapatiya tare. Sometimes, because of too much sinful activity, the living entity does not get a material body. He hovers around in subtle platform, that is ghost. The presence of ghost is terrible for those who are living in the gross body. They keep on troubling. And Prabhupada writes some details about the prana, kundalini. The soul passes through the kundalini chakra like a serpent crawling on the ground. The life air is compared to uraga, the serpent. So the kundalini chakra, that is like a serpent crawling. That's why life air is compared to serpent. Okay, next verse. Brihad balam mano vidya Bhayendriya nayakam Panchala Panchavishaya Yanmatye Navakhampuram.
The 11th attendant, who is the commander of the others, is known as the mind. He is the leader of the senses, both in the acquisition of knowledge and in the performance of work. The Panchala kingdom is that atmosphere in which the five sense objects are enjoyed. In the Panchala kingdom is the city of the body, which has 9 gates.
Brihad Balam, the 11th. 10 are described in the previous verse. The 5 senses, 5 working senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses. And the 11th is the most powerful one, that is the mind. Ubhaya Indriya Nayakam, he is a Nayak of both knowledge acquiring and working. He is a leader. Mind is a leader. As Krishna also says, Shrotram, Chakshu, Sparishanam cha, Rasanam, Ghranam evacha, Adhishthaya Manaha. Who is the Adhishthata? That is the mind. All these are the subtle senses. If you see this, now as a Bhagavatam student, we can understand and appreciate this. Krishna is describing our transmigration in the 15th chapter, how the soul passes. So in that he says, Shrotram, Chakshu, Sparsha, Rasana, Ghrana. These are not the gross body, gross senses. These are subtle senses. So just like the air carries the aroma, the subtle senses are carried to the next body, not the gross senses. Okay, Prabhupada writes. The mind is the center of all activities. He is very powerful. Brihad Bala. In the 11th canto, in one place, it is described the God-like power of the mind. The mind is very powerful. Mind has God-like power, insurmountable. According to training, the mind is a friend or enemy. If one gets a good manager, his state is very easily managed. But if the manager is a thief, his state is spoiled. So if the mind is a thief, then we are gone. So therefore, Prabhupada writes, try to bring all the senses and the mind at the lotus feet. Savaivana Krishna Padaravindayo, like Ambarish Maharaj. Yes, Prabhuji, you have a question. Saji Pranto.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So, Prabhuji, it's very difficult. We know that all of us, we know that mind is very difficult to control. Chanchali Mana Krishna, even Arjuna says, ki, I can't control my mind. Arjuna definitely representing a sadhak jiva and informing all of us. But it's when the intelligence is corrupted, it is although it is even more difficult. So, is there any possibility that human being can control his mind on his own?
One answer there है ना उसमें
without
next
mercy
श्लोक
of
में अभ्यासेन तु कौन्तेय वैराग्येन च क्रियते. This is the only thing Krishna accepts from Arjun. असंशयम महाभावो, बराबर बोल रहे हो. Mind is difficult, durnigraham. But then he gives a solution also, abhyas and vairagya. So it is possible. Although mind is insurmountable, very powerful, but Krishna is more powerful. Only the spiritual practice can control the mind. That is also not so easy. First, basically, we have to learn to neglect the mind. Prabhupada writes in one of the purport, the easiest way, the only way to control the mind is first of all neglect it. That is where we have to begin. Otherwise, if somebody thinks I will chant nicely and my mind will be in control, nahi hoga aisa. In the beginning, we have to learn to just neglect the mind for whatever he says. Mind will keep on shouting, but learn to neglect it. Depending on the mercy of the Lord. How to neglect the mind? When we understand that Lord is all powerful and whatever is happening in my life, it is controlled by the Lord, ordained by the Lord. So why should I be so much disturbed and fearful? Because mind has oscillations of shoka, raga and dvesha. Shoka, moha, bhaya. So all these fears can be eliminated when yasyam vai shruyamanayam krishna parama purushe. I hope some लोग थोड़ा श्लोक भी याद कर रहे हैं.
The intelligence, when intelligence is corrupted, na Prabhuji, I mean, it's like materialistic intelligence, like how Puranjani, who's a materialistic intelligence. Here, Puranjan is getting attracted to Puranjani because Puranjani is his materialistic mind, I mean, intelligence actually. Mind is getting bewildered because the discriminative power of intelligence is lost. So the intelligence has to be bala, means it has to be strengthened, or maybe uh, it has to support for the discriminative power. Then only mind will be, we are able to control the mind. Na?
Yes. So that's what we are doing. When we are studying scriptures, we are making our intelligence, spiritual intelligence strong. We are not under the control of material intelligence. We are getting our intelligence from scriptures. Scriptures are our intelligence. We are not having material intelligence. We are not taking shelter of our own intelligence. We are taking shelter of the intelligence which is coming from scriptures. And that purifies our material intelligence. Scriptures, they purify our material intelligence, and it further purifies the mind. So that is the sequence. We have to take shelter of scriptures, and then gradually our intelligence will be purified. Now it is very difficult. We cannot rely on our intelligence, because that's why whenever we are in problem and difficulty, refer to scriptures, approach some devotees, ask them, this is the problem, how should I handle this? So that is the understanding we should have. Okay. Okay, so we'll continue. Now, in the next series of verses from 8 to 16, we'll just quickly now read just the translations. The same description Narad Muni is describing. It is a city of 9 gates. Yeah, and if some other explanation is needed, we'll do it. Yeah, translation. 8th verse.
The eyes, nostrils, and ears are pairs of gates situated in one place. The mouth, genital, and rectum are also different gates. Being placed into a body having these 9 gates, the living entity acts externally in the material world, and enjoys sense objects like form and taste.
Okay, next verse.
Two eyes, two nostrils, and a mouth, altogether 5, are situated in the front. The right ear is accepted as southern gate, the left ear is northern gate. The two holes or gates situated in the west are known as the rectum and genital.
Next verse.
The two gates named Kadyota and Avirmukhi, which have been spoken of, are the two eyes side by side in one place. The town named Vibrajita should be understood as form. In this way, the two eyes are always engaged in seeing different kinds of forms.
So we all have heard this, thoda yaad rahega. Kadyota, Avirmukhi, 2 eyes, and with their friend Dyuman, Chakravarti Thakur writes, they go to a city of Vibhrajita. Vibhrajita means the brilliant city. That means whatever is illuminated, that there only the eyes can go. Next.
The two doors named Nalini and Nalini should be known as the two nostrils, and the city named Saurabha represents aroma. The companion spoken of as Avaduta is a sense of smell. The door called Mukhya is the mouth, and Vipana is the faculty of speech. Rasagya is the sense of taste.
Prabhupada writes about Avadhuta. A person is not under the control, rules and regulations of any injunction, is called as Avadhut. He can act as he likes. So Avadhut, who is this Avadhut? Who is the friend of the nostrils? This air. And air can go anywhere. Nobody can say, idhar mein jana hai. Air can go anywhere he likes. That's why he's called as Avadhut. Prabhupada writes about the mind. Mind is also like this, Avadhut. Chanchalami Mana Krishna. Next verse, translation.
The city called Apna.
Apana.
Apan. The city called Apan represents engagements of the tongue in speech, and Paudana is the variety of food stuffs. The right ear is called the gate of Pitru, and the left ear is called the gate of Vaibhav.
Next.
Narada Muni continued, the city spoken of as Dakshina Panchala represents the scriptures meant for directing pravritti, the process of sense enjoyment in fruitive activities. The other city named Uttara Panchala represents the scriptures meant for decreasing fruitive activities and increasing knowledge. The living entity receives different kinds of knowledge by means of 2 years, and some living entities are promoted to Pitraloka and some to Devaloka. All this is made possible by the 2 years.
So it depends on what we are hearing, it decides our destination. So Prabhupada writes about Shruti Dhara, the knowledge received from them through Vedas, through oral reception, they are called as Shruti Dhar. And depends on what we hear, we get our destination, either Vaikuntha or Pitriloka or Devaloka. Next.
City called Gramaka, which is approached through the lower gate of Asuri, the janitors, is meant for sex, which is very pleasing to common men who are simply fools and rascals. The faulty procreation is called Drumada, and the return is called Niritti. And the rectum is called Niritti.
Okay. So whatever is glorified in this outside world is given all the bad words in Bhagavatam. Fools and rascals. Those who give all the importance to enjoyment of this world. Prabhupada writes. Even in a sacred place as Vrindavan, unintelligent man pass off this rectum and genital business as spiritual activity. Prabhupada writes about that. Then Prabhupada writes about Aravak. The desire for sexual satisfaction is meant for Aravak, the lowest kind of people. And Durmada and all that. Okay. And then Prabhupada writes, if anybody does sinful activity in Vrindavan, they become hogs and dogs and monkeys. One time Prabhupada was talking to some devotees and one hippie came and he was asking, Swamiji, if somebody, I have heard that if somebody does sinful activity in Vrindavan, they'll become animals. And if somebody does intoxication, if somebody does illicit sex, what will happen to him? He'll become a pigeon. Okay, Swamiji. If somebody does gambling, what will happen? He'll become that. And if somebody does intoxication, what will happen? He'll become a hippie in Los Angeles. So Prabhupada would always answer the mood of the person. Kya chahiye isko? Prabhupada was very expert in answering according to the mood of a person. Same question, different answers. Just like one time somebody asked Prabhupada, can you see God? Prabhupada said, yes, God is everywhere, can't you see? Another time Prabhupada said, somebody asked, can you see God, Swamiji? No, you are coming in between. So Prabhupada would give different answers. Anyways, next verse translation.
When it is said that Puranjana goes to Vaishasa, it is meant that he goes to hell. He is accompanied by Lubdaka, which is the working sense in the rectum. Formerly, I have also spoken of 2 blind associates. These associates should be understood to be the hands and legs. Being helped by the hands and legs, the living entity performs all kinds of work and moves ithantitham.
Next verse.
The word Antapura refers to the heart. The word Vishuchina, meaning going everywhere, indicates the mind. Within the mind, the living entity enjoys the effects of modes of material nature. This effects sometimes cause illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation.
So this Puranjana would go sometimes to the inner chambers to rest. What is this inner chamber? That is the Antapura, is heart. So the consciousness resides in the region of the heart. That's where the Atma resides and rests. Prabhupada writes, the mind and intelligence of the living entity in material existence is affected by the 3 modes, and according to the modes, mind goes here and there. And depending on where the mind goes, he feels 3 types of emotions: illusion, satisfaction, and jubilation. So which mode gives rise to illusion? Which mode gives rise to illusion? Tamoguna. And what gives rise to pleasure in the beginning?
Passion.
Is Rajoguna. And what gives jubilation? That is ultimately Sattvaguna. So that's what Prabhupada writes in the purport. Okay. So now after this, from 17th. Okay, one more he explains about this. Yeah, translation.
Normally, it was explained that the quench is one's intelligence. While one is awake or asleep, that intelligence creates different situations, being influenced by contaminated intelligence. The living entity envisions something and simply imitates the actions and reactions with intelligence.
So that's how whatever the intelligence says, the living entity does. That is the imitation. We heard Puranjan was doing everything, whatever his wife was saying. She would say it, he would also say it, she would eat, he would eat. So that's how the living entity follows and does whatever the intelligence says. Prabhupada writes. In the conditioned state, the living entity acts according to his material contaminated intelligence. Although he simply remains an observer, he nonetheless acts, being forced by a contaminated intelligence, which is really a passive agent. So then in the next chapter, we heard this Puranjana. He left his wife one day, he sat on the chariot and went to hunt. That was another analogy of the chariot. So now from 18th verse onwards, in 3 verses, he explains this chariot analogy. Translation.
They already these things.
हाँ
Nahi वापस.
वो तो परपोर्ट हमने पढ़ा ना, that we understood. बेचारे प्राचीन बरी को तो खाली श्लोक सुनने को मिल रहा है ना. We understood the purports of Prabhupada. We didn't wait for this chapter to come. We have heard everything. So बेचारा प्राचीन बरी is thinking ये क्या सुना रहे हैं, क्यों सुना रहे हैं. तो बेचारे को अभी दोबारा बता रहे हैं कि भाई this is what I told. हमको लग रहा है ये क्या है, सुना दिया ना, दोबारा दोबारा वही चीज. That is प्राचीन बरी के लिए. Translation.
Narad Muni continued, what I referred to as the chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull that chariot. As time passes, year after year, these horses run without obstruction. But in fact, they make no progress. Pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. The 3 modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The 5 types of life here constitute the living entity's bondage, and the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver, the heart is the sitting place in the chariot, and the dualities of life such as pleasure and pain are the knotting place. The 7 elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are the first external processes. The 11 senses are the soldiers. Being engrossed in sense enjoyment, the living entity seated on the chariot anchors after fulfillment of his false desires and runs after sense enjoyment, life after life.
Okay, so that was the chariot analogy. And then Prabhupada writes, what is the real progress? The living entity keeps on running in the chariot from one body to another body. Prakrite Kriyamana, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridesha Arjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantrarudhani Maya. As if seated on a machine or from one chariot to another chariot. But the only progress one can make is when one hears about Krishna. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti. Prabhupada quotes a verse. Eita brahmand bhari ananta jivagan 84 lakshayoni karay brahman. 84 lakh yoni mein he keeps on moving around. Abrahma bhavana loka. Okay. And then Prabhupada quotes this verse is bhajan by Narottam Das Thakur. Just as the king is seated on the chariot, living entity is seated in the body, the sitting place is the heart, and the living entity sits there and engages in struggle without going on, without progress. Rishabh Dev says that everybody in this world is practically born defeated. We are not born victorious. We are born defeated. We are born in this material world means पहले हार गए इसलिए आए इधर. पराभवस्तावद अबोध जातो यावन्न जिज्ञासत आत्मतत्त्वम्. So नरोत्तम दास ठाकुर's भजन. कर्मकांड ज्ञानकांड केवल विषेर भांड. अमृत बोली जेबा खाए नाना योनि सदा फिरे कदरे भक्षण करे तारा जन्म अधः पाते आए. Okay, next verse. Then the Chandaveg attacks, powerful time. Next verse.
What was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights, named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number is 16.
Next.
What was described as Kala Kanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age. But Yavaneshwara, Yavan Raj, who is death, accepts Jarad, old age, as his sister, and wife also too.
Yes, wife also. Encaged within the body, living being accepts old age just before death. And Yavaneshwara is the emblem of death. One is subjected to the influence of Yavanaraj and his sister due to impious activity. A devotee is not under the control of death. He transcends the death. Death is just a phase to go to the eternal life. Just like Dhruv Maharaj stepped on the head of death personified and climbed the Vaikuntha airplane. Okay, so now, he continues this description about the attack of Chandaveg. What happens? Yes. Next verse translation.
The flowers of Yavaneshwara, Yamaraj, are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbance that pertain to the body and mind. Rajavara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to the obedience to other living entities and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity subjected to the necessities of body, mind, and sense, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plants due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 of years within this body.
So that's how the living entity, trying to enjoy in this material world, suffers. Asango ayam purushaha, Prabhupada writes. Although the living entity has no connection with this material existence, but still he suffers because he starts identifying with the body. That was the question Shukdev Goswami was asked by Parikshit. What is the relation between the soul and the body? How can there be a relation? Soul is spiritual, body is material. So what is the reply of Shukdev Goswami? Prabhuji, abhi humne fourth canto का एग्जाम दिया है, for second canto का भी एग्जाम लेना पड़ेगा लग रहा है.
Because the soul identifies with the body, that is the connection.
Yes, actually, Shukdev Goswami says there is no connection at all. It is all illusion, like a dream. I'm just reading a question. Yavana is death personified or fear? Yeah, Yavan Raj is the death personified, which represents fear also. They're both things. Chakravarti, somewhere Prabhupada writes about the fear. Yavana is the fear of death. So these are both things. Fear of death. That is Yavana Raj. Okay, so Prabhupada writes in the purport about the problems of this material world, because the purport, the translation describes a living entity. He goes on suffering in various types of diseases one suffers. And Prabhupada writes, Therefore, Krishna says, learn to tolerate the dualities. Titikshasva, because the default setting of this world is problems. Learn to tolerate the dualities of this world. Prabhupada writes, the living entity is subjected to many tribulations brought by air, water, fire, heat, cold, sunshine, etc. Everything gets disturbed. Intestine, throat, brain, and everything is affected by diseases. And that results in the old age, when the person is about to die. Two types of fever. Prabhupada writes about adhibhautika, adhyatmika, adhidaivika klesh. Next verse, translations. I'm not going to the detail because we have discussed this. Yeah.
The living entity by
So basically in this section, now from 27th to 33rd verses, Narad Muni is giving the direct description of material existence. What happens in this material existence with the living entity? Yeah, continue.
The living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good or bad fortune. But when he forgets his supreme master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up unto the modes of material nature. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body, and for interest of the body, he becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, sometimes the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature.
Okay, so the same principles of Bhagavad Gita. So what happens? Living entity, Krishna bhuliya jiva bhogavancha kare, comes in this material world, starts identifying with the body. In Dashamula Tattva, Thakur describes a series of events. What happens to a living entity when he comes in this material world? The first thing is misidentification. He starts identifying with the body. And then, second, he gets subtle body. First, the mind and intelligence, the subtle body is given. And then the gross body is given. And when he gets the gross body, his misidentification becomes more and more pronounced. And he starts thinking, I am this body. And then he engages in all the material activities. Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma. Prabhupada writes that famous verse, Bhunkte prakriti jan gunan. He enjoys and suffers in all the species of life. 84 lakh species, Prabhupada writes. And then Prabhupada writes how living entity, he has little freedom and he misuses his freedom and he gets entangled in this material world. Living entity's constitutional position is very minute and he can be misled in his choice. Mukti hitva anyatha rupam Swarupena Vyavasthiti. Now we have forgotten our Swarupa, so we are suffering. What is liberation? When we understand Jivera Swarupoe Krishnera Nityadas. Okay, next verse, translation.
Those who are situated in the mode of goodness, I see no harm in the emotions. Thus they are elevated to higher planetary systems, where the demigods live. Those who are influenced by the mode of passion engage in various types of productive activities in the planetary systems where human beings live. Similarly, those influenced in the mode of darkness are subjected to various types of misery and live in the animal kingdom.
Same verses, Bhagavad Gita. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastha, madhye tishtanti rajasa, jaganya gunarittistha adho gachanti. Prabhupada writes in the purport, only by the mercy of the Lord one can be freed of all this misery, cycle of birth and death. Because in this world, or ugra karma, to come out of the clutches, daivi yesha gunamai mama maya duratya mameve prapadyante. So when one starts serving the Lord, serving the devotees of the Lord, as Chaitanya Charitamrita describes, Tate Krishna bhaje kore guru sevan maya jala chute baye Krishnera charan. When somebody starts worshipping Krishna and serves the spiritual master, then they come out of this entanglement of material existence. Okay, continues. Next verse, translation.
What by the mode of ignorance in material nature, the living entity is sometimes a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a human, sometimes a human being, sometimes a demigod, sometimes a bird, an animal, and so on. In this way, he is wandering within the material world. His acceptance of different types of body is brought about by his activities under the influence of the modes of nature.
So living entity, although is spiritual, but because he gets material contaminated intelligence, he comes in touch with various types of bodies trying to enjoy. And Prabhupada in the purport it describes the same. The living entity is as brilliant as the Supreme Lord. The Lord is like the full shining sun, and the living entities are the sun rays. When these particles are covered by the cloud of Maya, they lose their shining capacity. When Maya is gone, the particle becomes brilliant again. Prabhupada gives this example many times. Till the time the spark remains with the fire, the spark has his illumination. As soon as the spark comes and falls on the wet ground, wet grass, loses its potency. That is what has happened with the material, with the living entity. Under the influence of Maya, the living entity becomes exactly like a person haunted by a ghost. What is the symptom of a person who is haunted by a ghost? Speaks all nonsense. That is what we do. We speak. Sorry, मतलब यहाँ पे लिख रहे हैं. मतलब बाहर वालों के लिए है, हमारे लिए. To be more refined. Actually, that is what when Brahma and Narada they are conversing, and Narad Muni asks Brahma ji, भाई आप ही लगता है सबसे बड़े हैं. You are the supreme. You are creating, maintaining, destroying. Are you the supreme? So Brahma ji says only foolish people they think like this. Vilajyamanaya yasya sthatum iksha pathe amoya vimohita vikathante. Vimohita, those who are illusioned, they speak like this. How to understand who is illusion, who is not illusion? Just see their language, what they are speaking. They speak in terms of mama aham iti. Ye मैं और ये मेरा. Anybody who speaks like this, foolish. That is vimohita vikathante. So that is what is happening. You may be an expert, Prabhupada writes somewhere. Somebody may be a polished fool. Polished fool means यहाँ पे scientist, philosopher, politician, सबको Prabhupada royal गाली. But we cannot, of course, do all this in public. Because Prabhupada would say, you can't imitate me. Old men and children, they can say anything and then they can get away with that. If you imitate, then you'll be implicated. So all the plans of material, in this material world, they are all failures ultimately, Prabhupada writes. Now, in the next verse, Prabhupada quotes this, Tatev Krishna bhaje karer gurura sevan, maya jala chute paye Krishnera charan. Prabhupada never leaves a chance to give the solution though. He's like a mother who always keeps on repeating the same thing again and again. And somebody may say, एक ही चीज को बार बार बोलते हैं ये. Prabhupada says, still you are not understanding. I am repeating the same thing. Still you are trying to enjoy. Now, why Puranjan became a woman in the next life? That is described in this verse. One is wandering in different species. Sometimes it was man, sometimes women, sometimes eunuch. Next two verses are very powerful. Shutparito yatha dina Sarameyo griham Yaddishtam Dandam modanameva Yatha kamashayo jiva Javaja patha brahmam
Ucha vacha
पर्यधो अमद्येवा याति दिष्टं प्रिया प्रियम्
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Living entity is exactly like a dog who overcomes
रॉयल
his
गाली
hunger,
देते हैं भागवत
goes from
like a dog.
door to door for some food according to his destiny. He sometimes receives punishment and is driven out, and other times receive a little food to eat. Similarly, the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, wanders in different spaces of life according to the destiny. Sometimes he is high and sometimes he is low. Sometimes he goes to the heavenly planet, sometimes to the hell, sometimes to the middle planet, and so on. Hare Krishna. This is the translation.
For Americans, this may not be making sense, right? मतलब शुद्ध परितो यथा दीना मारे इधर के कुत्ते तो एंजॉय करते हो बोलेंगे दे आर हैविंग अ रॉयल टाइम बट ये इंडिया का गली वाला कुत्ता है मतलब Prabhupada would say that if you want to appreciate Bhagavatam, go to village. There you can appreciate because Bhagavatam gives all the examples from the village setting. So, Shut Parito Yatha Dina means a dog who is bichara moving around in gully. Sometimes he is given some food to enjoy, sometimes he is beaten. Charan Vindantyadishtam Dandam Odanam. कभी दंड मिलता है कभी ओदन मिलता है that's how living entity is. Sometimes he goes to the higher species, sometimes to the lower species according to his destiny. Prabhupada writes. By chance, the living entity's position is herein likened to a dog's. By chance, a dog may have a rich owner. By chance, he may be a street dog. As a dog of rich man, he lives very opulently. Sometimes in the Western countries, we hear of a master leaving millions of dollars to a dog in his will. Bataiye. Of course, there are many dogs loitering the street without food. So all this is now it has come to India. In the South Mumbai, we can see all this. We have so many shops of dog parlors. तो इतना खुल गया इधर तो नहीं देखने को मिलता होगा ना आप लोगों को नहीं दिखता थोड़े दिन की बात है इधर भी खुलेगा हाँ वो अपने मतलब जस्ट इन फ्रंट ऑफ अपना जो मंदिर के सामने वाला रोड है ना उसमें 2 शॉप है डॉग पार्लर लग्जरी पेट ग्रूमिंग सो एंड मतलब उस दे फील प्राउड कि हम लोग यहाँ पे इतना बड़ा अच्छा शॉप खोले मालूम है
Devatas also laugh at us when we go to beauty parlor.
Somebody was saying that if devatas want to give gali to others, बोले ये मनुष्य कहीं का because that's how मतलब it's all relative world, right? हम लोग गाली देते हैं कुत्ता बोलते हैं तो उनके लिए मनुष्य है she is a lower category. Then Prabhupada says, but it is best to become Krishna's dog. In the material world, dog is sometimes elevated, sometimes he's on street. In the spiritual world, Krishna's dog is perpetually, eternally happy. Oh, Vaishnava Thakur, tomaro kukura boliya jana more. I want to be a dog. Vaishnava's dog is chalega. That is the glory of somebody becoming a devotee of Krishna. Because Sarvabhauma Grihe Das Dasiye Kukur Seha Mora Priya Anya Jana Rahudur. Mahaprabhu tells Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya after delivering Amoga. Sarvabhauma is saying, Arey Baba, why you delivered him? He should have died. अच्छा होता मर जाता उसको मुक्ति मिलती इतना पाप किया उसने अरे in your house even a dog is dear to me. What to speak of Sarvabhauma Amoga? So that is how great even a dog of Vaishnava is. A dog always keeps himself at master's door and does not allow any person unfavorable to the master to enter. Similarly, one should engage in the service of a Vaishnava and try to please him in every respect. One of the Prabhupada disciples, one of the Matajis, some Yamuna Mataji or Malti Mataji, I think. one of the memories she was saying, we were like the guinea pigs of Prabhupada. Prabhupada was taking us everywhere and experimenting on us how to apply Krishna consciousness. We are so very happy. I think she dog pulti hai, people come somewhere, she speaks something. We are so happy becoming the experimental animals for Prabhupada. So it is better to be a pet of a great devotee than to be in this world trying to enjoy as a big person. And that's why it is described, Kita janma ho yadi tua dasa bahirmukh brahma nahi mora asha. I am happy to become a insect in the house of your devotee as a servant. Bahirmukh Brahma, it will never happen. Brahma will never become Bahirmukh Brahma. Brahma is always a devotee because these posts are never given to non-devotees. But this is a way to say, rhetoric. Just like we say, agar Suraj bhi paschim se ugega na, still I will not do this. So that is how he says, even if Brahma is a non-devotee, I don't want to become Brahma. Brahma will never become a non-devotee. So that is how glorious the devotee of the Lord is. Next verse. He says, now, though nobody can escape from this material world, dukkeshu ekatarenapi daiva bhutatma hetusho jivasya na vyavachchedaha syachet tat pratikriya.
Living entities are trying
The
to
living entities are
counteract
trying to
different miserable conditions pertaining to providence. Other living entities or the body and mind still they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature, despite all attempts to counter these laws.
Nobody can counteract the problems of this material world. Pratikriya na yasyeha. Dhritarashtra, as Vidur is telling, Arey, you are already blind. Now you have become deaf also. Kuch pach nahi raha hai tumko. As you are speaking, all the ragas are coming out. Just get out. You are living like a dog. Hima pavarjitam pindam madatya grepalavat. So with Dhritarashtra says, you have given me so many good counsels to bring me out of difficult situations. Iska bhi koi solution batao na. Vidur says, Pratikriya na yasya. There is no way to counteract the misery of this world. Kutaschit karhichit. No way, nowhere. Because Saish Bhagavan Kal. It is Bhagavan Kal. It is time who is the energy of the Lord. Sarvesham na samagata. Everybody has to go through this. Prabhupada writes. There is no need to counteract the miseries of material world, Prabhupada writes. Yeah. Actually, poor man suffers for the want of money, but if he wants to become rich, he has to struggle. Actually, this is not a valid counteracting process, but a snare of illusory energy. If one does not endeavor to counteract his situation and satisfied with his position, knowing that whatever he has obtained is past activities, he should engage in devotional service. Beautiful verse. We'll recite this together. Tasyeva heto prayateta kovido na labhyate yad brahmatam pariyadaha tallabhyate dukkhavadanyata sukham kalena sarvatra gabhira ramhasa. Therefore, Narad Muni is telling this. One should not endeavor for anything which is there in this 14 material planets. Endeavor for that which is not obtained in this world, that is devotional service. Everything else will be destroyed. Devotee is never destroyed. Bhakti is never destroyed. Bhakta is never destroyed. Kaunteya pratijani. Chakravarti Thakur writes, the foolish dog gets the stick. But the intelligent man does not do activities to cause suffering. He has remedy for his suffering caused by sickness, which he happens to get. There is no separation from even one of the three types of suffering. Everybody suffers. One cannot escape the suffering. That means remedy is also the cause of suffering. Who says this? क्या बोलते हैं?
Like the solution for a problem.
श्लोक मतलब 2-3 वर्ड. दुःखौषधम तदपि दुःखम, ये श्लोक है. मतलब बहुत बड़ा है, बट इट इज द मेन. दुःखौषधम तदपि दुःखम. दुख की औषधि is a bigger दुख. Okay. Now, the 33rd is a very wonderful example. Prabhupada has given this many, many times. If a person is carrying a big burden, इधर बहुत भारी लग रहा है, थोड़ा इधर से उठा के इधर रखो ना. That is what is Bhagavatam's example. यथा हि पुरुषो भारम.
यथा हि पुरुषो
मतलब
भारम
सर पे रखा है, सर से उठा के कंधे पे रखता है. हाँ, सर थोड़ा अच्छा लग रहा है. फिर इधर से उठा के इधर रखता है. यथा हि पुरुषो भारम.
यथा हि पुरुषो
शिरसा
भारम
गुरुमुद्वहन्.
शिरसा गुरुमुद्वहन्
कंधेन साधत्ते.
नास्कन्दना
तथा सर्वा
नाधत्ते
प्रतिक्रिया.
तथा सर्वा प्रतिक्रिया.
A man
Hare
may
Krishna.
carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises to counteract the burden does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another. Hare
This is just such a powerful example, very strong. Whatever we do, it is just like transferring burden. इधर से उठा के उधर का अच्छा लग रहा है, फिर थोड़ा देर अच्छा लग रहा है. That is all counteraction in this material world. Prabhupada writes, this is a good description of an attempt to transfer burden from one place to another. This does not mean that he has become free from the strain. इधर से उठा के उधर रखा. No, that is, he is not free. That is the human civilization. Trying to solve one problem, creating another problem. Dukkha aushadam tadapi dukkham. What's the solution? Surrender to the Lord. Follow the laws given by the Lord. Otherwise, there is no way we can come out of this. The suffering is always there, one way or other. How one wants to get beaten, that is the only thing. ऐसे मारना है, वैसे मारना है, किधर मार पड़नी है वो बताइए. मार तो पड़ने वाली है. We'll be beaten for sure by material energy. Next verse. नैकान्तता प्रतीकारा.
नैकान्तिक प्रतिकार
कर्मणां कर्म केवलम्.
कर्मणां कर्म
वयमेव
केवलम्
विद्योपसृष्टम्.
स्वयं है
स्वप्ने स्वप्न इवानघ.
स्वप्न सेवा इवानद. Hare Krishna. Narad continued, "Oh, you who are free from all sinful activity, no one can counteract the effect of fruitive activities simply by manufacturing a different activity devoid of Krishna consciousness. All such activity is due to our ignorance. When we have a troublesome dream, we can't relieve it with a troublesome hallucination. One can counteract a dream only by awakening. Similarly, our material existence is due to our ignorance and illusion. Unless we awaken to Krishna consciousness, we can't be relieved of such dreams. For the ultimate solutions of all problems, we must awaken to Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
So now, Prachina Barhi may say, well, the cause of suffering is sinful actions. Chakravarti Thakur is writing this. So he may say cause of suffering is sinful actions. So therefore, we can destroy all the sinful actions by doing sacrifices. We'll do big sacrifices. Will it not suffice? So in the next two verses, 34 and 35, and practically from 34 to 41, in this section, Narad Muni gives the ultimate solution for the soul's predicament, that is Bhakti Yoga. Nothing else can solve the problem completely other than Bhakti Yoga. Nai ekantata pratikara. Ekantata pratikara means ultimately, if you want to counteract all the miseries of this material world, it is possible only by one way. It is by practicing Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, there is no other way. One can get relief from this hallucination. Prabhupada writes, he says this, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Do not remain in darkness. Learn to counteract this darkness of the illusion by cultivating knowledge. Prabhupada writes, there are two kinds of fruitive activities. What are the two kinds of fruitive activities? One, to counteract the distress of the material body. That is one type of fruitive activity. And another type of fruitive activity, he says, there are two kinds. We can place the burden on the head and the shoulder. What is the other type of fruitive activity? Prabhupada is writing here. Not able to understand. Anyways. Okay, so one kind of fruitive activity is to counteract the distress, and that fruitive activity creates another distress situation. That is another fruitive activity we have to do to counteract that distress situation. So Prabhupada writes, both situations are only illusion. So there is no absolute solution in this material world. They are all relative solutions. And people are just working day and night to solve the illusory problems and to get the illusory happiness. Problems may not be illusory. Problems look real. But because we are not material beings, so for us, the problems, they are actually an illusion because nothing touches the soul. It is just a perception that this is mine, that's why I'm suffering. That is all dream situation. Prabhupada writes, to counteract the distress of this material body, one has to take another distress condition. Both situations are illusion. There is no gain in taking on one trouble to counteract another trouble. So one cannot be happy in this material world. Another is a very, very famous verse. Arthe hi avidyamanepi samsritirna nivartate manasa linga rupena swapne vicharato yatha.
Sapne vicharato yatha. Hare Krishna.
A tiger in dream or a snake in vision, in a vision, but actually there is neither a tiger nor a snake. Thus, we create some situation in a subtle form and suffer the consequences. These sufferings cannot be mitigated unless we are awakened from our dream.
You must have seen people shouting in dream, crying in dream. देखें आप लोग हमारे मंदिर में हमारे ब्रह्मचारी तो टेम्पल में सोते हैं तो कभी तो चिल्लाते हैं कोई तो बहुत साल पहले आई थिंक we were there and one devotee started shouting and throwing his legs in mosquito net and सब लोग देख रहे हैं खड़े होकर क्या कर रहा है सबकी नींद उड़ा के. So if somebody is haunted by a tiger and is running in the dream, so how to solve this problem? उसके बगल में सो जाओ, उसके ड्रीम में लाठी लेके जाएंगे, शेर को भगाएंगे. This is not a solution है. Solution is wake him up, उठाइए. But the problem is the dream which Maya Devi is creating. अपने को अच्छे से सुलाती है ना. पिशाचिरा कोले कैसे शुरू होता है वो? जीव जागो गौरचंद्र बोले को तो निद्रा जाओ माया पिशाचिर कोले. Maya Devi doesn't allow us to get up also. उठने ही नहीं देती है. Even if we are shouting, बोले नहीं नहीं कोई बात हो जाएगा, सॉल्व हो जाएगा, सोते रहो सोते रहो. The person who is shouting in the dream, for him the misery is real. We cannot say क्यों हो रहा है, सब तो illusory है. For him it is not illusory, it is real for him. So that's how when we cry in this material world, the pain a living entity goes through is real, because we are identifying with the body. So person who is shouting and crying in the dream because he is identifying with the dream body, for him the misery is real. So solution क्या है? जीव जागो, wake up sleeping souls. कुछ लोग तो अलार्म भी लगाते हैं वो प्रभुपाद का, rascal get up. अरे सुना आप लोगों ने? नहीं सुना है? I have seen वो प्रभुपाद का एक ये है, rascal get up. When will you sleep? उठते उठते गाली सुन के उठ रहे हैं प्रभुपाद की. Anyway, so Prabhupada writes, the living entity is always separate from subtle and gross body. We have to learn to tolerate the dualities of this world. Chakravarti Thakur writes, because the happiness and distress are qualities of the body, actually there is no suffering for the jiva. The same principles. What is the use of trying to destroy suffering that does not exist? Though suffering does not exist, without wiping out that misconception, the material existence will not cease. Although it is all illusory, but still the experience is real. Till the time we don't get up, we'll keep on suffering. So how to stop this samsara? Next two verses describes. Very beautiful verses. Athatmano artha bhutasya यतोऽनर्थ परंपरा
यतोऽनर्थ परंपरा
संसृति तद्व्यवच्छेदो
संस्कृति
भक्त्या
तद्वच्छेदो
परमया गुरौ
भक्त्या परमया
वासुदेवे
गुरु
भगवती
वासुदेवे
भक्ति योग
भगवति
समाहितः
भक्तियोगः समाहितः
तद्रीचीनेन वैराग्यम्
तद्रकीतेन
ज्ञानं च
वैराग्येन
जनयिष्यति.
ज्ञानं च
One such श्लोक है similar.
जनयिष्यति.
Same है
वासुदेवाय
ना?
भक्ति
Few words are
भक्ति जनयत्या शिवैराग्यं ज्ञानं च यदहैतुकम्.
okay. Thank you. Yeah, translation please.
The real interest of the living entity is to get out of the nescience that causes him to endure repeated births. The only remedy is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead through his representative. Unless one renders devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, one cannot possibly become completely detached from this material world, nor can he possibly manifest real knowledge.
Atha atmano artha bhutasya, the real interest of atma, the real interest of living entity is anartha parampara, to get out of this anartha parampara. This parampara is going on there. What is this parampara? Birth and death. That is the parampara. Anartha parampara. What is the real interest? Samsriti yat vyavacheda. To get out of this anartha parampara is the only artha of a living entity. How to do it? Bhaktya paramaya gurau. Surrender to the Lord through his representative. What will happen by surrender? What will happen by bhakti? Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Gyan. That's why Lord has written all the scriptures, given all the scriptures. People in this world, they are suffering and they don't know why they are suffering. People don't know what is the way out of this. Therefore, Vyasdev, he has written scripture, Satvat Samhita. Satvat Samhita कहाँ पे आता है? सुना ये शब्द ना? Satvat Samhita. क्या सुना है? ऐसा नहीं बोल सकते नहीं सुना है. अनर्थ उपशमम साक्षात भक्ति योगम अधोक्षजे लोकस्य अजनतो विद्यम चक्रे सात्वत संहिता. Sattvat Samhita means Bhagavad Puran.
Bhagavad.
So Vyasdev, knowing well that people of Kali Yuga, people of this world, they can't come out of this material entanglement. So he has written Bhagavatam. Prabhupada quotes that in this. Sattvat Samhita. Prabhupada quotes that in the purport. Chakre Sattvat Samhita. Vyasdev compiled this literature to remove this anartha. So Prabhupada is basically focusing on this word anartha. Anartha means getting a body is itself anartha. And unless one gets a representative of the Lord, Guruya, Bhaktya, Paramaya, Guru, one cannot come out. And then Prabhupada describes some of the details of principles of Bhakti, Bhakti Yogam Adhokshaje, Vasudeve Bhagavati. So Prabhupada writes about that. We'll not go into the detail of this. Next verse. Okay, Chakravarti Thakur writes something. He says, by sadhan bhakti, one attains prem bhakti. That is explained in these verses 37 and 38. 37 and 38. He is describing how one can move from sadhana to prem. Prem bhakti to Vasudev is completely dedicated to Lord alone, samahitaha. Only for the Lord. It is for the pleasure of the Lord, not for one's own happiness. And it naturally produces jnana and vairagya. Next verse. Sochiradeva rajarshe syadachyutakathaashrayaha Shrindvata Shaddadhanasya Yada Syad Adhiyataha.
Listen to the kings, one who is faithful, who is always hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness and in hearing of the Lord's activity, very soon becomes eligible to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face.
Hearing leads to seeing the Lord. So achirat, kab hoga? Achirat, very soon it will happen. Or again, or Rajarshe, Syat, Achyut Kathaashraya, one who is engaged in culture of Krishna consciousness. And he has taken shelter of hearing. Shinvataha, shelter of hearing. How? Shraddhadhanasya, with faith. If somebody hears Achyut Katha with faith, then Nityada Syad Adhiyataha. He will be able to see the Lord face to face. That is the power of practicing Krishna consciousness. Bhagavad Gita also Krishna says, Anne tu evam ajanantaha shrutva nebhya upasate. 13th chapter, 26th verse, I think. Shrutva nebhya upasate. One who worships the Lord by just hearing. Tepi chati taranti. They also cross. So process of hearing is glorified everywhere. That's how we develop attraction for the Lord. That's how we see the Lord. Shrutva gunan bhuvana sundar shanvatam te. Rukmini Devi says, Shrutva, suna hai aapke baare mein. So that's how it is. As Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Kubuddhi chhadiya kara shravana kirtan achirate pabe tabe Krishna charan. Just give up your all duplicitous mentality. Shravana kirtana. अंतरे निष्ठा कर बाह्य लोक व्यवहार अचिराते कृष्ण तमाय करिबे उद्धार. अंतरे निष्ठा कर. Mahaprabhu is telling to Raghunath Das Goswami all this. Have faith within. Bahya loka vyavahar. Do all the worldly dealings externally. Achirate Krishna tamaya karibe uddhar. Very soon Krishna will deliver you. Don't worry. Don't be impatient. Markat vairagya na loka dikhaiya. Don't show monkey renunciation. In due course of time, Krishna will come and release you. Kab hoga? Kaise hoga? How will I run away? से छले से काले कृष्णा स्फुरबे तुम्हारे कृष्णा कृपाए जारे तारे तेरा खीते पारे. से छले से काले. Krishna will reveal when you have to leave this. Now don't be impatient. Just by cultivating this process of hearing and having faith, Shraddha, Shinvata, Shraddadhanasya. Avashya Rakshibe Krishna. Krishna Kripa Koribe. This is the faith of a devotee. For that, we have to take that leap of faith sometimes. Like Vibhishan, he took the leap of faith. Risked his entire life. Everything. पता नहीं राम देंगे कि नहीं शरण, इधर के भी चले गए, उधर के भी नहीं रहे. न माया मिली न राम. But he had that risk. He took that risk. So that's how we have to take that risk. Where we will find bhakti? कहाँ मिलेगा bhakti? Next verse answers. Next two is very beautiful verses. Where will bhakti take place? Yatra bhagavata rajan sadhavo vishadashaya
साधवो
bhagavad
विषनाशया
kathana
भगवद्गुणानुकम्पा
श्रवणा व्यग्रचेतसः
श्रवणं
तस्मिन्
व्यग्रचेतसः
महन्मुखरिता मधुभिच्चरित्र
तस्मिन्मुखरिता माधवश्चर्चम्
पीयूषशेष सरिता परिता श्रवन्ति
पीयूषशेषसरिता परितः
ताते
स्रवन्ति
पिबन्त वितृषो निपगाढकरणैः
ताते पिबन्त नृपगाढकरे
न स्पृशन्त्यशनत्रिदभयशोकमोहा
जानन् सुवत कृतभयशोक.
My dear king, the place where pure devotees live, following the rules and regulations and thus purely conscious and engaged with great eagerness in hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In that place, if one gets a chance to hear the constant flow of nectar, which is exactly like the waves of river, one will forget the necessities of life, namely hunger and thirst, and become immune to all kinds of fear, lamentation, and confusion.
So now, because Narad Muni has glorified the process of bhakti in the last few verses, so Prachina is thinking, "Arey, bhakti karenge kahan pe? Kaise? Where will I practice bhakti?" So he says, "Yatra Bhagavata Rajan, O Rajan, wherever there are Bhagavatas, who are sadhava, who are devotees, Vishadashaya, they are broad-minded, they are pure, wherever they live. You know what happens there? Bhagavad Gunanukathana. They are always engaged in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. And they are Vyagra Chetasa. Vyagra means they are eager. ऐसा नहीं कि खत्म हो गया क्या, हाँ चलो अच्छा हो गया, खत्म हुआ. They are Vyagra Chetasa. They are eager to hear more and more. Vayam tuna vitripyama. We are not satisfied. Keep on reciting more. So wherever such type of devotees are there, you go there. You will find bhakti.
Yeah. So this thing, as you said, na, you should have eagerness and this thing.
I am just speaking. ऐसा नहीं कि I have that.
No, I just want to say. So sometimes we like to hear some story format and this thing, but when it comes to
क्या करें अभी इतना philosophy चल रहा है अभी. I can't do anything.
talking about this. But philosophy आगे तो इतना we don't feel very eager to keep on listening for hours and hours. Okay, sir.
So what is the question?
I'm just thinking, is it okay? Is it not?
मतलब ठीक है अभी. It is not much of a problem for a devotee, but because philosophy makes our this is the art of a great speaker. That is why Shukdev Goswami is glorified so much. He blends philosophy with stories because he knows ज़्यादा philosophy सुनाऊंगा तो लोग बोलेंगे कितना philosophy सुना रहा है, और story सुनाएंगे, then people will not get the understanding what is the principle behind the story. So it is the responsibility of the person who is giving Bhagavatam to make it more enlivening, ऐसा नहीं कि आपको जो करना है करो, मुझे तो भागवत सुनाना है. See, there are two types of katha. There is teaching Gita to people and teaching people Gita. What is the difference? Teaching Gita to people and teaching people Gita.
Yeah, when you teach the Gita to the people, you're just basically talking about the Gita without any relevance to their personal application. And when you're teaching people the Gita, it is teaching the Gita with practical application in their lives.
Okay, yes.
Objective, basically.
Yeah, where is the emphasis? In some
In the
classes.
first, the emphasis. Sorry?
Yeah, continue.
No, Prabhuji, you please use.
Yeah. So in the first part, teaching Gita to people, the emphasis is on teaching Gita. People may be at different level. So I have to speak the philosophy of Gita, and I'm not so much concerned about where are the people, just like अपने भक्ति शास्त्री में ऐसा होता है. We can't understand कौन से devotee का क्या level है. So now हमको syllabus पढ़ाना है, and we are giving the philosophy. So that is right, because I'm not so much aware, I'm not in touch with the people, the devotees. So I'm just speaking the philosophy, and my responsibility is to make it a little more lively so that devotees can understand. But when somebody is giving a congregation class, then I can't say, आज मैंने भगवत गीता का 13th chapter पढ़ा है, the most technical chapter of भगवत गीता, और कुछ प्रिपेयर किया नहीं है, तो एक काम करते हैं, आज 13 chapter सुनाते हैं. So that is not justice to the audience. So it depends on the speaker. It is the speaker's responsibility to make the subject matter lively and palatable for the audience. It is not just the problem of the content. It is also the responsibility of the person who is speaking the Bhagavatam. So that's why Shukdev Goswami is glorified. Shukamukad Amrit Dravya Samyutam, because he knows the art. So that is what. Some people, they like philosophy. They get excited. Just like.
I think you should philosophy applies to men and women likes to.
I love philosophy, Prabhuji.
I'm proved wrong.
Immediately you are proven wrong. So you can't expect everybody to be same. You can't expect Jayadvaita Maharaj to give a Leela Katha. You tell Jayadvaita Maharaj to speak Ramayana, and he will say in 10 minutes Ramayana over. क्या बोलने का? Question answers. He can keep on taking question for hours. That's him. So some devotees का अलग-अलग है. So Radhanath Maharaj, when he gives, मतलब शुरू किए तो no end to it. He can keep on speaking whole day. Maybe Ramnami class में after 2 hours he says, now I should begin my class. And devotees also like it. Hari bol, मतलब मजा आता है. हाँ, और महाराज बोल रहे हैं अभी, begin my class. So that is how different devotees are. So you can't say, अरे मुझे philosophy पसंद नहीं है तो अच्छा है क्या बुरा है. This is everybody's individual. But main thing is we should be very, very clear with the understanding of philosophy. सिद्धांत बलिया जीव चित्ते ना कर आलस. किसको philosophy सुनने में मजा आता है नहीं आता है, that is the personal subjective thing. But the understanding of philosophy should be proper. That is सिद्धांत बलिया जीव चित्ते ना कर आलस, इहा हईते कृष्ण लागी सुदृढ़ मानस. Very famous words where it is described. One should not be lazy in understanding the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Iha hoite Krishna lagi sudrida manas. When we understand the philosophy, then our understanding about bhakti principles become very strong. Krishna lagi sudrida. We become strong in our desire to achieve Krishna. So that is Vyagra Chetasa. Shravana Vyagra Chetasa. Devotee should be eager to associate. You should associate with devotees. They are Vyagra Chetasa. Just like Dhruv Maharaj says, I want to associate with devotees. Bhakti Moho Prabhatam. Prahlad says, I want to associate with devotees. And then what happens in association? Prabhupada writes, cultivation of Krishna consciousness is possible when the great devotees live together. And we'll see the next second verse also, then we'll see how. And you know what happens when one hears Hari Katha? Tasmin Mahan Mukharita Madhubhit Charitra. When the nectar, Sarita, Piyusha Sesha Sarita. Sarita means river. When the river of nectarian narrations of the Lord, Mukharita, when it flows from the mouth of the great devotee, Tasmin in लोगों के, previous verse, पहले जो description है, यत्र भागवता राजन साधव, when they speak Hari Katha, Piyusha Shesha Sarita Parita Shravanti, you know what happens? And if somebody drinks this, Ta ye pibanti, कैसे पिएंगे? How to drink this nectar of Hari Katha? Through the ears. Ears are special. We can do everything with ears. We cannot just hear, we can see also. क्या बोलते हैं उसको? Shastra Chakshu. We can drink also. कौन सा श्लोक है?
Pivata Bhagavatam.
Pibata Bhagavatam. We can smell also through the ears. सुना है हमने श्लोक ना? कौन सा है वो? जिघ्रन्ति कर्ण विवरे श्रुतिवात नीतम. कैसे शुरू होता है? Jighranti, the great devotees, can smell the aroma which is coming from the lotus feet of the Lord. कैसे smell करेंगे? Karna vivade. And what is the air which carries this aroma? Shruti vatanitam. The scriptures are the air. कैसे शुरू होता है? Jighranti karna vivarai shruti vatanitam. So we can see, we can smell, we can drink, we can make our ears as the cup of hands. क्या बोलते हैं? Karna Shrotanjali Upasprisya. Make the ears as Anjali. Anjali means Anjali बनाइए, cup of your hands. And drink this nectar. कान का अंजलि बनाओ, उसमें डालो. So, yate pibanti avitrisha. When one hears with eagerness. Gada karni, attentive. तब क्या होगा? These 6 things will go out of, 5 things will go out of the person's life. Ashana, Trit, Bhay, Shok, Moh. Hunger, thirst, fear, lamentation, illusion. Parikshit Maharaj is the example of this. I am not hungry and thirsty. Keep on reciting. Don't feel I am satisfied. नहीं मिल रहा है. हाँ, ये तो त्वदीय चरणाम्बुज कोश गंधम जिघ्रन्ति कर्ण विवरे श्रुतिवातनीतम भक्त्या गृहीत चरणा परया च तेषां नय पैशिनाथ हृदयाम्बुरुहात् सपुंसाम्. ये तो त्वदीय चरणाम्बुज. Oh my Lord, those who can smell the aroma of your lotus feet, charanambuja koshagandham jigranti, they smell how? Shruti vatanita. Okay. So Prabhupada writes, cultivation of Krishna consciousness is possible when the great devotees live together and constantly engage in hearing and chanting. That is the parameter of our residence. Where to live? Wherever the devotees are there. Wherever Krishna Katha is going on, wherever festivals are going on. Otherwise, Swarg bhi nahi chahiye. That is what Devtas they say. Prabhupada writes, Bhavad Gunano Kathana Shravana Vyagra Chetasa is significant. A businessman is eager to go to the place where business is transacted. The devotee is eager to hear from the lips of liberated devotees. Eager, Satam Prasanga. Okay, we'll take this Chakravarti Thakur's purport and then we'll stop. Where will the bhakti take place? It takes place where there are the devotees with hearts eager to hear about the Lord. Just as those who are attached to the house, they are eager to engage in household activities. And such devotees, they feel the time for the discussion about the Lord and hearing about the Lord have passed. What great misfortune. Samay nikal gaya. I could not hear. Now the time for chanting the Lord's glories have arrived. I am so unfortunate. I could not hear the glories. Now they have started kirtan. I could not hear the katha. So that is the lamentation of a devotee. I have wasted my time in sleeping, performing all the daily rituals. How can I quickly go to the assembly of the devotees? This is Vyagra. How a devotee is eager. So Chakravarti Thakur is writing the feelings of a devotee who is eager. I wanted to hear more. Where are the devotees speaking about the Lord? What are the rules? The topics which accept the mouth. The topics which reside at all times in the mouth of the devotees. That's the topics of the Lord. So these devotees, they are always eager. They drink the rivers of Harikatha with great thirst, so that not even a drop goes waste. Just like Prithu Maharaj, what he prayed? I want millions of years. Why? Because in so many universes, Lord is appearing in so many avatars. I want to hear all the katha. I don't want to waste even a single moment. And therefore, he says, the devotee, because his heart is full of this nectar of Harikatha, he cannot be touched by hunger, thirst, fear, lamentation. And they do not have the desire for eating. They don't think prasad kab milega. Because they are fed by the devotees. They are fearless. So he is explaining how the devotee is fearless, how the devotee is free of hunger because they are fed by Krishna Katha. Chakravarti Thakur is writing another beautiful verse. Tena smaranti atitaram. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll continue next time. So Narad Muni, he ends this description in the next verse. And then from 42nd verse onwards, Narad Muni, he describes all this, and Prachina Barhi ends his performance of all the rituals. And Narad Muni emphasizes it. And then again another story about a deer comes. Hare Krishna, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagvatam ki jai.
Jai Srimad Bhagavatam.
Let's go.
Thank you so much, Prince.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Guru.